In an era in which the whispers of forgotten traditions seem to resonate with surprising clarity, an accelerated sense of time impregnates our existence. Signs and portents, once relegated to the kingdom of myth, multiply around us, inviting humanity to look up at the sky in search of answers. With each devastating natural disaster and each intensifying geopolitical conflict, a growing anxiety settles within us, a foreboding that we are on the brink of an event of profound consequences. Among the many voices of the past, emerges one with remarkable precision and renewed urgency, prophecies wrapped in mystery, which now demand our attention. Edgar Cayce enters, the enigmatic sleeping prophet, whose visions, a powerful mixture of spirituality, incipient scientific understanding and frightening warnings, resonate with a disturbing relevance in our modern world. Of particular concern is his prediction of the possible collapse of the Gulf Stream, a catastrophic event that, according to Cayce's readings, could materialize already in 2025. Born in 1877 in Kentucky, Cayce was all the less ordinary. Even in his youth, he displayed extraordinary abilities, affirming perceiving spiritual entities, listening to incorporeal voices and experiencing vivid visions of another world. Named the Sleeping Prophet by the peculiar way in which his most significant revelations were obtained, Cayce entered a deep state similar to a trance, apparently asleep, during which he accessed a vast reserve of knowledge. From these sessions, meticulously documented in more than 14,000 transcribed readings, remarkably precise predictions of important historical events emerged. He foresaw the cataclysmic fall of the value market in 1929, the ominous rise of Adolf Hitler, the broad global conflict of the Second World War, the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union, and the notable economic rise of China. However, a particularly alarming prophecy remains unfulfilled, but is increasingly closer to becoming a chilling reality: the collapse of the Gulf Stream, a critical artery in the Earth's climate system. Before delving into Cayce's specific revelations about this climate phenomenon and its possible connection with the near future, particularly the year 2025, consider subscribing to our channel. Here we unravel the intricate threads that connect forgotten prophecies and the subtle signs that configure the fate of humanity. If this resonates with you, share this video with those who seek to understand these deep truths and activate the notification bell to make sure you don't miss any future revelations. The Gulf Stream, a colossal ocean current, functions as a vital conveyor belt, transporting warm water from tropical regions to the north through the Atlantic Ocean. This process is essential to regulate the climates of North America, Europe, and even Africa. Without the moderate influence of the Gulf Stream, the world as we know it would sink into a climate chaos. Seasons would undergo radical changes. Polar ice would melt at an accelerated rate and vast regions could become uninhabitable due to extreme temperature fluctuations. According to Cayce's prophecies, there will come a time when this crucial current will experience a sudden and dramatic interruption, triggering drastic climate changes and large-scale geographical transformations. In his own prophetic words, warm air will begin to move in opposite directions and the Earth will undergo transformations like never before. Many have interpreted this as a crude warning about a possible reversal or collapse of the Gulf Stream. What is added to the chilling nature of Cayce's prediction is the fact that contemporary scientists are now confirming a significant deceleration of this vital current, a phenomenon that, if not controlled, could lead to its total collapse. Modern researchers who address the issue from a purely scientific perspective, far from any notion of spirituality or prophecy, now affirm that this point of critical inflection could occur within the next decade. Some researchers even specifically point to 2025 as a potentially crucial year. Could it be that Cayce, decades before, precisely predicted this imminent crisis? However, Cayce's prophetic visions extended far beyond mere climatic events. His pronouncements encompass spiritual, political, and even technological dimensions of the future. He spoke of a global transformation, not only external and material but also internal and spiritual, a profound change in human consciousness. According to Cayce, suffering would serve as the catalyst for this awakening, a spiritual purification that would precede a new era of understanding and interconnection. In numerous readings, Cayce indicated that the world would enter a new vibratory frequency from the second half of the 20th century. However, He specifically identified the period around 2025 as the moment in which this profound transition would reach its peak, potentially initiating an era of unprecedented changes and transformations for humanity. The prophecies whispered about a deep collective awakening, a rebirth of the human spirit destined to flourish, but only after enduring a crystal of intense tribulation. It was predicted that these tests would not be limited to a single nation or a specific sphere of existence. Their nature would be intrinsically global, impact the very physical tissue of our world, and penetrate the deepest corners of our spiritual being. A feeling of anxiety is instilled when contemplating the remarkable synchronicity that resonates in the channels of the prophetic vision. Another figure, apparently disconnected, but equally devout, also experienced a series of chilling revelations about this precise era of global agitation. Sister Agnes Sasagawa, a humble Japanese nun who resides in Akita, Japan, was chosen as a recipient for the divine messages. From 1973, it is said that the Virgin Mary communicated with her and pronounced a sequence of pronunciations that painted a raw and terrifying picture of an imminent perdition. Her messages resonated with images of divine retribution, burning punishments descending from the heavens, the devastating destruction of entire nations, and, perhaps most disturbingly, a deep and seismic division that tore apart the very heart of the Church. For years, these pronouncements were received with widespread skepticism, and many ignored their seriousness, including those within the Vatican's sacred halls. Doubts persisted and visions remained largely unrecognized, relegated to the margins of religious discourse. However, the tide of disbelief began to change when an extraordinary phenomenon occurred. The statue of the Virgin Mary, which accompanied the nun, began to cry, shedding genuine and visible tears. In total, this inexplicable event occurred on 10 different occasions. Rigorous investigations began to discredit the statements and find a rational explanation for the weeping statue. When scientific scrutiny confirmed the authenticity of the tears, the event was officially recognized as a miracle, and skepticism began to erode. Since then, researchers from various fields have begun to meticulously examine the visions of Sasagawa, establishing disturbing parallels between their pronunciations and those articulated by the famous psychic Edgar Cayce. Both figures, separated by geography and origin, spoke of an unprecedented suffering that envelopes the world. Both predicted the collapse of established institutions, the redesign of geopolitical borders, and a fundamental redefinition of the global order. And, in a chilling way, both pointed to the same approximate time frame for these cataclysmic events, the years close to 2025. Prophecies of Sasagawa focused on a spiritual purification, a painful cleansing process that, ultimately, would lead to the emergence of a small and resistant group of faithful survivors. Cayce, on the other hand, described a vibratory change, a profound alteration in the energy frequency of the Earth, which could only occur after humanity collectively recognized its past transgressions and returned to a path of spiritual alignment, guided by faith in a pod. He offered specific signs to pay attention to: fire falling from the sky, catastrophic changes in the geography of the Earth, and a deep crisis within the Church itself, reflecting Sasagawa's internal division vision. In Cayce's pronouncements, the scope of the imminent changes reached truly apocalyptic proportions. He affirmed that the poles of the Earth would undergo a dramatic change of position, which would lead to a generalized geological agitation. Entire regions, he warned, would be submerged under the increase in sea level, while lost lands, dormant for millennia, would emerge from the depths. It was seen that this phenomenon would be directly related to alterations in the magnetic fields of the Earth and changes in the powerful ocean currents that regulate the global climate. In his crude and disturbing words, the Earth will break in several places at the same time, the waters will invade the lands, the city of New York will be destroyed, the west coast of America will disappear in large part. He also predicted the sinking of Japan and the resurgence of legendary lands like the Atlantic, evoking images of an irrevocably transformed world. While these predictions may initially seem the product of wild imagination, discarded as fantastic and far from reality, the events that are taking place in our current era cast a disturbing light on their possible validity. It is evident that the frequency and intensity of earthquakes have increased, inactive volcanoes are waking up from their lethargy more regularly, solar activity has entered a more aggressive and unpredictable cycle, and the once debated spectrum of climate change is no longer a theoretical concern but a tangible reality, with its impacts perceptibly affecting all the continents of the world. At the same time, within the Church, precisely as the prophetic Sagaba, we are witnesses of growing divisions, scandals that shake the foundations of faith, and a profound crisis of identity that threatens to crumble its unity. Doctrinal confusion is increasing and religious leaders are publicly contradicting themselves, sowing discord and uncertainty among the faithful. The Pope himself has openly recognized that we are experiencing a third world war, gradually released, a fragmented conflict that is developing all over the world. It is as if all the pieces of a complex puzzle were gradually fitting into place, as if the dormant, latent prophecies for decades finally awoke, awakening to a new and dangerous reality. Edgar Cayce also spoke of a world leader that would unexpectedly rise to prominence, causing a great polarization and division among the population. This figure, he suggested, would emerge from the business world, a man whose actions would cause intense conflicts but which would also, paradoxically, mark the beginning of a profound transformation. Many have interpreted this aspect of Cayce's prophecies as a reference to Donald Trump. Although Cayce never explicitly named a specific individual, his descriptions were remarkably precise, enough to cause a deep speculation and a fervent debate. According to Cayce's visions, this leader would be the target of an assassination attempt, to which he would miraculously survive. This near-death experience would catalyze a deep spiritual transformation within him, and what initially seemed to be the end of his political career would ultimately serve as the genesis of an even greater mission, divinely ordained. Cayce also affirmed that after enduring a great confrontation, this transformed man, guided by an unbreakable faith, would emerge as a beacon of hope and guidance. This leads to an inevitable question, and if Cayce's predictions, discarded for so long, were precise from the beginning, what would happen if the year 2025 really marked a key turning point in the history of humanity? If the Gulf Stream collapses, as both Cayce and contemporary scientists predicted, the global climate would undergo a radical and irreversible change. Europe could sink into a perpetual state of harsh winter, while the tropics, on the contrary, would face even more scorching and uninhabitable temperatures. Bad crops would become widespread, supply chains would collapse, and the very foundations of global civilization would be threatened, pushing humanity to the brink of survival. The possible displacement of millions of people presents a raw vision of the future, a scenario full of seeds of unprecedented geopolitical instability. This massive migration could trigger a domino effect in the waterfall, fundamentally remodeling the political, economic, and even spiritual panorama of our planet. However, Cayce, a figure of spiritual perspicacity, interpreted these cataclysmic possibilities as integral components of a broader transformative process, a global purification, so to speak. He perceived the agitation approaching not as an end, but as a necessary prelude, although painful, of a spiritual renaissance, a renaissance of the human spirit. This same concept, that the collapse can serve as a powerful catalyst for renovation and profound change, also reverberated in the prophecy of the Sister Aegis Sasagaba. Sasagaba imagined an era after the destruction characterized by a profound conversion and a radical change of priorities. According to his prophecies, there would come a time when the survivors, those who firmly refused to deny their faith, even in the midst of the most horrendous tragedies, would unite, driven by a shared purpose, to rebuild the world on a base of unbreakable spiritual values, unlimited compassion, and unbreakable truth. In his profound vision, this faithful remnant would serve as the seed of a new and enlightened era, a beacon of hope in the dark. These individuals, he predicted, would not necessarily be the most powerful, rich, or influential members of society. On the other hand, they would be the humble and the contrite, those who had prayed fervently with sincere hearts, fasted diligently in search of spiritual clarity, and searched tirelessly for divine mercy, even when the world seemed to crumble around them. The surprising parallels between the prophetic visions of Cayce and his sister Sasagawa extend beyond the issue of collapse and renovation. Surprisingly, both figures predicted celestial events marked by fire that descended from the heavens. Sasagawa literally spoke of fire that falls from the sky, while Cayce described an incandescent light that emerges in the celestial sphere, a sinister omen that precedes a period of great terrestrial transformation. These evocative descriptions hold a strange resemblance to what modern science identifies as solar storms, colossal explosions of electromagnetic radiation emanating from our sun. Such events have the potential to overwhelm and paralyze global-scale electrical energy networks, precipitating generalized cuts, compromising the functionality of vital satellites, and disrupting essential communication systems. Scientists have issued increasingly urgent warnings about the genuine possibility of a Carrington event today, a solar storm of such magnitude that it could sink our interconnected digital world into an almost total state of silence, cutting the invisible threads that bind us. In his spiritual readings, Cayce frequently referred to the legend of Atlantis, a civilization recognized for its incomparable technological advances, but which was ultimately consumed by its own spiritual arrogance and arrogance. He prophesied prophetically that the remains of this lost civilization would resurface near Bimini in the 1960s, a prediction that apparently materialized in 1968 with the discovery by divers of an intriguing underwater rock formation now commonly known as Bimini Road. While scientists continue to debate the true origins and nature of this enigmatic structure, those who have dedicated themselves to their study believe that it represents a tangible fragment of a lost past, a first and subtle sign of an ancient truth that gradually returns to our modern world. For Cayce, Atlantis transcended mere legend, served as a terrible warning, a warning that reflects the dangerous consequences of a civilization that prioritizes scientific progress and technological power above its vital connection with the divine, the source of true wisdom and lasting values. When we return our gaze to the current era, we observe that this same pattern is repeatedly disturbing. The unprecedented technological advances, previously confined to the scope of science fiction, now coexist with a generalized crisis of values, a disturbing erosion of moral principles, and a desperate, often wrong, search for meaning in an increasingly complex and fragmented world. Cayce predicted that, after a period of deep and generalized suffering, humanity would gradually evolve towards a new and elevated state of consciousness, a transformative change that he called universal Christic consciousness. He believed that this spiritual state would transcend the artificial and often destructive divisions between peoples and religions, giving rise to a unifying force based on the principles of unconditional love and unlimited compassion. According to his prophetic ideas, the initial stages of this profound transition would begin around 2025, a date that fully places us at the threshold of this potential transformation. Another surprising element that both Cayce's visionary pronouncements and the prophetic messages of Sister Sasagawa are a profound concern for an imminent internal crisis within the Church. The Japanese nun, with chilling precision, warned that the demon would infiltrate insidiously into the Church, even reaching its highest levels, and that the priests would rise up in opposition to the priests, the bishops against the bishops, fracturing the institution from within. As we observe the contemporary panorama, characterized by a palpable loss of spiritual authority, increasingly profound doctrinal divisions, and a growing feeling of confusion and disillusionment among the faithful, it becomes increasingly difficult to rule out the precision and gravity of this prophetic warning. In the case of Cayce, although he himself was Protestant, he astutely predicted that a significant religious quake would shake the very foundations of the Christian world deeply. According to his prophecies, although true spirituality would last and even flourish, the rigid and hierarchical structures of the organized religion would end up being unsustainable and would finally crumble. For those who follow the current events with a keen eye and attention, it is impossible to ignore the feeling that something significant is taking place just below the surface of historical narratives. The messages, prophecies, and warnings that once seemed purely symbolic or allegorical now resonate with an almost disconcerting challenging us to face the potential realities they foretell. Earthquake, pandemic, volcanic eruption, war, religious persecution, and, above all, a growing spiritual despair. Cayce and Sasagawa seem to have left a map, a guide for those who want to understand not only what is coming, but how to prepare for it. And this preparation, according to both, is not based on money, weapons, or escape plans. It is spiritual. It is repentance, prayer, fasting, the sincere search for a connection with God. It is to abandon arrogance, indifference, the idolatry of the ego. It is to return to the basics. Cayce said that the souls that kept the vibration of faith would be protected even in the heart of chaos, and Sasagawa affirmed that those who prayed with the heart would be guarded by angels. However, There is an even more disturbing detail in Cayce's prophecy about the collapse of the Gulf Stream. In one of his readings, he affirmed that the interruption of the stream would be followed by a shake of the foundations, which many interpret as extreme magnitude earthquakes. The California geological fault system, as indicated by the coast of San Andres, is being monitored with concern by seismologists. Yellowstone, the supervolcano that sleeps under the United States, also shows unusual activities, and on the other side of the planet, the Pacific Ring of Fire continues to boil. We are experiencing, in the air, the signals. Another aspect of Cayce's prophecies that connects with our times is the figure of a polarizing leader that would be essential in this period of transition. As we have mentioned, many see in Donald Trump the fulfillment of this image. Cayce spoke of a man who would face a trial, would survive an attempted murder, after this trauma, would go through a spiritual transformation. All this resonates with what we saw in 2024, when Trump survived an attack, as Brandon Biggs predicted in his prophetic visions, who described the exact scenario where the former president would be touched in the ear during a rally, a scene that came true before the eyes of millions of witnesses. From this event, many believe that Trump will not only be a politician but a symbol, a catalyst, a man who, whether we like it or not, is linked to the prophetic destiny of the end of times. And if the visions are correct, his role in 2025 will be even more decisive, both in politics and in the spiritual awakening of the United States and the world. But at the center of all this is still the fundamental question, and what will we do before these warnings? Will we ignore them as simple superstitions, or will we open our eyes to the signals that are accumulating in the four corners of the planet? Cayce and Sasagawa have not brought these messages to sow fear, but to offer an option. There is still time, there is still room for repentance, there is still grace, but this window is closing. Humanity is in a crossroads. On the one hand, the ecological, political, moral, and spiritual collapse. On the other, the slow awakening, painful but possible. Cayce saw this decision not as a collective but individual. Each soul would choose its path. Each would decide whether to follow the light or get lost in the darkness. And Sister Sasagawa confirmed this call. Those who remained faithful until the end would be saved. Time passes and everything indicates that 2025 will be the year in which the election will be definitive. Are we ready? Are we willing to abandon everything that keeps us away from the truth to embrace what leads us to salvation? The prophecies have been given, the signals are here. Now the decision is ours.